So sometimes they'll put them in these other platforms that restricts entry. But then again, the use case for that, it's a misalignment between the customer experience and what you're trying to do. You're trying to
Mhm.
lock this stuff away, and you make it additionally inconvenient for the client because they can't open it on every device, or they can't print it off when they want to, or they can't. Most PDF softwares now allow you to highlight and mark up in the document itself. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Book More Show. It's Stuart Bell here, and today joined by Lee Ramey. Lee, how's it going?
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for
Fantastic.
having me on.
Pleasure. I'm actually excited for this because I kind of start every episode with a bit of context of how I know the person. And we started off doing episodes just internally, and it was often me and Dean or me and Betsy. And then we've done a large number of author interviews, which is what this is, with people who we've worked with. And then we've done a few kind of other companies who just have a very complementary way of doing business, which have been a few of the recent ones. But with the author ones, I think just the way that we invite people, we tend to invite people as they're getting towards the end of the process. And then we're not good enough at remembering to invite people from a few years ago where they've really got this experience. So this is what we're talking about today, because you wrote your book a couple of years ago, and the way that you're using it is really, I think this will give a lot of inspiration to other people in the way that they can use it. So we'll get to all of that, but let's start with a bit of context. So why don't you share with everyone kind of what it is that you do in the organization, then we can jump off from there.
Um, I started a cleaning business actually June of '84, so 40 years ago this June, and I was doing just janitorial, window cleaning, carpet cleaning, things like that. And as people would ask me to do it more things, I would have to go find out how to do it. There wasn't the internet
Right.
then, or you couldn't use YouTube University, so I had to go, ask questions and read books, things like that. And I got pretty good at things, but once I found out there was a science behind cleaning, there was a science behind drying something out. That just was the light bulb of, the inner geek in me. Just, I like this. I like knowing
Right.
the reasons why. Um, and there was a time period in the late '80s, early '90s that mold started to be a lot in the news, and lawyers were involved, and basically nobody in the business really wanted to deal with mold because everybody who touched it got sued. So,
Right.
but people kept on asking me, we got to do this, got to do this, and it actually was a church member says, we got a problem here, and could you please just help us out? We're not going to sue you, it just help us out.
Right.
And so I started searching around, and at that time, I had to go all over the United States, just little pockets of knowledge. Knew about respirators, knew about filters, knew about mycology, you knew about using what kind of vacuums and so forth. And a lot of this information was a little bit like the asbestos business, and there was used some of the same protocols, so such. So I wasn't one of the smart ones, but happened to be lucky enough that I was being taught by the same people who was uh, writing the books, writing the standards, setting, in the
Right.
forefront of doing it right. So um, as they were writing the books, they had called me up and say, "Hey, we don't know whether this A works or B works. Try one room this way and one try this way, and give me some
Oh,
feedback."
interesting. Oh,
Yeah.
so it was
So
really at the kind of, as they were setting the standards and the best practices, you were really involved in that kind of, I don't want to say trial and error, but
oh,
the
I was the
split
guinea pig.
testing
Yep.
of.
You just
It
say it.
was
I was
right.
the guinea
Yeah.
pig.
Right.
My
Well, that's
customers
such an
were.
interesting, right. It's such an interesting place to be, because you kind of put yourself in that conversation that's going on with the people who are setting those standards. So again, that opportunity doesn't come up for everyone, but it must have been a really interesting time in the market to kind of be involved at that level.
It was, and because just my personality, not being satisfied with, just a surface knowledge, I kept on wanting to do better and better, and as soon as a class was available, I would take it and so forth. I spent a lot
Right.
of time away from home. I wish My wife can attest to that on
Right.
seminars, if conventions, things like that. But as I continued to get better, it came that there was nobody in my market, and then I'm in Birmingham, Alabama, nobody in my market that was actually doing it according to the way the books were written. And so I've been in the business so long, I even had to talk the Yellow Pages into having a category for mold removal, a category for
Right.
mold inspection. I'd bring back a Yellow Page from Dallas or Atlanta and say, look, they got it. Why can't we have one here?
Right. Oh, that's so
So
funny.
yeah, so been in it a bit. Um, and it seemed as I continued to grow, I was able to help people. And at that time, I was just doing the mold removal. That's called remediation, removing the mold. Well, to do the mold removal correctly, you really need to know beforehand what's the scope of work, what needs to be done. Well, at that time, the industry was relying on what's called a CIH, or Certified Industrial Hygienist, because they'd been working with the asbestos people. And so they had some protocols, they knew how to do that. But they actually didn't know building science. And asbestos, once you remove it, it's gone forever. Mold,
Right.
you remove it, but the environment's still
Could
there.
come
New
back.
mold's going to pop up in the same place. So they didn't
Right.
have a full grasp of what was going on. So then I went back to school again to become an inspector. And so that was uh,
And
very, go ahead.
was that an existing inspector certification that like they existed, they just weren't really used? Or is this really laying the groundwork for what a mold inspector needs to be because it was all new territory?
It was all new territory. It was all new
Right.
territory because the CIHs, fantastic at what they did, but CIH means Certified Industrial Hygienist. So they were used to the industrial setting, having to
Right.
do with hearing and fall protection and safety around big moving machines. That was their
Yeah.
niche. But a indoor air quality professional for a residence, it wasn't known of. And so we were kind of I was fortunate enough to be on some of the trade associations that was first started and learned how to uh, not only get the work done, but communicate it and how to
Right.
make sure that we're doing it well and that satisfies the need for the customer and the need for the science.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, that's a great point. That's customer understanding of something when you're in an industry that has, I guess, financial advisors are the same in the sense that there's somewhat complex products that confuse people. So customers have a surface understanding of what they want, but not the details. You guys, for sure. I mean, people see mold or suspect mold, but then they don't know the details of remediation, or even more importantly, maybe the cause of it in the first place. So that education gap or understanding gap, is that more, and it may have changed over time, but is that more educating the customers so that they know more about it so that they can make better decisions themselves, or it's just a familiarity or a feeling that they're in the right place, so they're not at all interested in the details, but they just want the certainty that you know what you're doing?
Right.
How engaged are the customers typically, because it's residential rather than commercial?
You have both. You have the just bottom line people. How much is it going to cost? Am I going to be able to sell the house? Well, that's a lot of times.
Right.
That's a lot of times that kind of customer. They just want a certificate saying it's been done, so they can get rid of that piece of property or whatever. Then uh, I have quite a few medically very, very sensitive people, and they are allergic to everything. Probably allergic to their own
Right.
breath. I mean, they're just they're
Right.
just scared out of their mind about everything. So
Right.
a lot of it was, talking them in off the ledge. Yes,
Right.
mold can be an issue, but God made mold. It's everywhere. It's going to be outside. It's going to be dissolving things. There's way, God meant it to be. We just don't want too much inside our house, and we don't want any of the bad kind. They're just saying it
Right.
plain and simple. That takes care of 95% of all the population, actually 97% of all the population. Now, there is a sensitive group, and the backstory is my mom got really, really sick. We lived in a moldy house, so I saw the result of us being in a moldy house. And so indoor air quality always kind of had in the back of my mind, a very
Right.
part of my psyche. And
Right. Personal connection to it.
right, right. And so to answer your question, for those who just want to know that you know what you're doing, and then just just flashing it or just saying you have it, will
Right.
suffice. However, I have had customers who come back and text me back, 5 or 6 on page 7. You said this. What do you mean? 49. I mean, well, that's
Right.
fine. I know that they're engaged, and most of the time they become my best uh, cheerleaders because
Right.
they have they feel like
It,
they're validated in all the research they've done.
right. Actually, that's such a great point. That idea that it gives people, so we're talking, in case people are just listening, we're talking about using the book as the tool, and people are engaging with that at various levels. But it's something that I don't think has come up in the podcast that we've talked about before. This idea that it gives the receiver of the book a validation of their concerns or approach or desires, because someone has written something that resonates with them, and it backs up either a thought process that they've been trying to share with a family member, or even a peace of mind that
Bingo,
they're in the right space.
bingo,
That kind of
because
buy-in.
right, because a lot of times it will only be one in the family, or maybe the wife and a kid. That's kind of the scenario. The
Right.
husband, I'm not saying anything bad about men, but they sometimes are oblivious to the home environment. And
Right.
so they say, well, I don't smell anything. Well, I mean, the kids are going to get sick. They go to school and all that. And the wife says, I have I have this when I walk to this part of the house. Or remember, we go to this vacation spot. And after 2 days, I feel great. As soon as I get
Right.
home, within a few hours, I start feeling lousy again. So
Yeah.
uh, the females are much better at connecting the dots between the way they feel or the way they observe their family to something having to do with the house. And they may not know what. And so mold is kind of the first thing they think of most of the time. And I will say at this juncture, I can go into it later more if you want, but as a certified indoor environmentalist, there's about 7 or 8 major things that I take care of, including asbestos and radon and lead paint and bed bugs and VOCs and radon things. There's all different kinds of things in your house that can make you sick, but
Yeah.
mold is that first thing they think of. And because it's
Right.
a complicated subject and it's got a lot of moving pieces, I found myself just spending hours and hours on the phone just answering the same questions over and over. And that's why I started back in and I'll tell you, it was 2000, it was the spring of 2002, because I'd had an accident and I was bedridden for about 5 months.
Right.
I was in a wheelchair for 5 months. So as my kids were running the business, I was sort of making these consumer advisories, and they were,
Yeah.
12, 13 pages long on different subjects, but mold seemed to be the one they really wanted to learn more about. And so that became
That
the nexus of answering a lot of the basic questions. So it would save me time. And that,
right.
so in a way, it is kind of selfish in the first,
Ah, but
trying to say
but
be more efficient.
serving, right, and serving the community that's there, trying to give them as much helpful information as possible in the most efficient way as possible. I think all of us who are listening are, we're in the business because we've got a passion for it to some degree, and we really want to share the message. So this idea that having the time and the foresight to capture the questions and then feed that back to people, it's just it's serving the market that's there, and knowing that that then leads to business further down the track because you are establishing yourself as the expert. It's it can seem there is the option of thinking about it in a selfish way, but it's really just sharing that information is the least selfish thing around. It's trying to help everyone in a way that makes the most sense. So 2002, we've got the consumer reports coming together. You were saying the carpet cleaning type background, so I'm guessing that's where the Piranha marketing and Joe's Polishes world comes into it.
Yeah, I was a follower of Brother Joe Polish for still am.
Right. And those early, I mean, again, we've both got enough grey hair that we've been around the environment for a long time. Those early consumer guides or reports or room by room review or the carpet audits that Joe would do, all of these things to kind of move the not quite esoteric knowledge, but move the kind of the conversational knowledge and the experience-based reckons on what the answer is to something that's a little bit more formulated and official looking. So whether it's together in a report or a book, whether you've got a room by room review or the carpet review, which are some techniques that they've talked about in the past, but all of it goes to establishing this authority and building some rapport with people. So before the books were around, did you find that you were getting people feeding back, or the conversations that you had were referring to these guides that you'd created to people and the conversations that they helped start?
Yes, that's a great question because I try to look forward, but you have to get feedback from the past to know which way you want to go. And
Right.
so I knew I didn't want it to be salesy. I wanted to be educational, and we call ourselves an education-based company
Right.
because a lot of people hear the word mold and they get scared and they just get panicky. And even in say we're talking about upholstery or carpet cleaning, a lot of people really did appreciate the fact that here's a guideline. If you got blood and you use this. If you got, crayon, you try this. Before you call us, maybe you don't need us.
Right. Yeah.
And that was something that I really got the most feedback on it. The fact that people would say, well, thank goodness you're not going to charge me $100 and do 5 minutes that I could have done if I just known. Now
Right.
that if you were short-term thinker and you were transaction-based only, you'd say, well, I don't want my people, doing their own stuff. But the relationship was far better, when they're doing their jog, playing bridge, whatever, bowling, whatever. If the subject comes up, we're the ones they want to recommend.
Yeah, that idea that you become their guy, their go-to person, because you've started by being helpful first, and the small amount of transactions that you would get from those low-value jobs versus the goodwill and all of the larger jobs that you get because, okay, I can do these steps as myself, but this job is too big. Or today I can do these steps myself, but tomorrow the same thing happens, but I'm out of town, or it's a rental property that needs to be done immediately. Or there's lots of reasons why once you've kind of claimed that space in their head as the helpful go-to person that fills the spot,
Right.
there's much more opportunity for a
Right.
bigger piece of the pie down the track.
So a term we use a lot in our safety and sales meetings, we want to be their trusted advisor.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people use that term as a kind of a throwaway term and they kind of put it out there thinking that if I say it enough, people will believe me, but they're not actually fulfilling that role. Everything is a little bit more transactional. But it's overused sometimes. But if people can internalize what that really means, it really establishes a relationship so much stronger and evidence is that you're the trusted advisor, not just you're trying to tell people you're their trusted advisor. It's a slight mind shift change, but and it goes into this abundance type. A lot of our clients are strategic coach clients, and strategic coach has this very big emphasis on an abundance and a multiplier type mentality, rather than a scarcity and a locking in type mentality. So it ties in so well with a much better approach to doing things.
Mhm.
Um, let's move forward then. So we've got 2002, we've got some guides, there's some good feedback coming from that. Where do we start thinking about bringing that together in a book? Because I know the first book was before we had a relationship, you were bringing some pieces together for that. Was it a was it a relatively quick transition in the thought and then it took a while to execute, or did you think about writing a book and then immediately started bringing it together? How long did it take to percolate?
Oh, if I'd had a if I could have done it over, I would have come to you first. It was a slog. It was a tough slog to get through. Um, so my books, I tried to keep most of the small little subjects that, because of printing. My dad was a printer, so I learned a few little tricks. And
Okay.
we did our own printing actually here in shop.
Oh, wow.
So we tried to keep them at either 16 or 32 pages. And after 32 pages, I really wasn't telling enough, and I really didn't want to. And so I started saying, well, I guess I got I need to either do an A and a B, one
Right.
and a two, or a continuing series, whatever you call it. But then, because I've always listened to marketing ideas and so forth, and they talked about a book, and that resonated with me because there's some kind of aura, maybe not as much now, but there was always kind of an aura. If you had the ability and time to write a book, it just seemed that people put you up just a little higher in their
Yeah.
estimation a little bit. And so everything I was doing was not a perfect bound, or as I like them now, and they were either spiral bound or stapled together, things of that nature. But when I decided to do a book, then I had plenty of information,
Right.
and I I'm an early riser. Unfortunately, I wake up at 3:30. My eyes
Oh,
just
wow,
pop.
that is early.
Yeah. So
Right.
so I would spend an hour or so most mornings, and it took me about 9 months or so to put the information down, and then categorize it into chapters and so forth. And then it took me probably another year to pull the pictures, and uh, and it wasn't a really simple book. It was, because mold can go deep. It had, the chapters on, what do you need to do? What can you do? When do you need a professional? What
Mm.
about my contents? What if it's in the crawl space? Each of those. But I had, of the scientific data, I had the indices in the back, which then I had the footnotes
Ah, okay.
to come back
Lincoln
to, which
too.
which is a little
Yeah.
more complicated. So, I really uh, applaud Betsy and Kim for all the hard work they did getting that done, because we'd have it all set up, and then we'd move a paragraph and we'd lose the link.
Something would change. Yeah, yeah.
If something would change, or do this, and all of a sudden the picture's way out here. Um, but I got through with the whole thing. I put it on Amazon. To be honest, never did, and I was 100% correct. I never did sell a lot on Amazon.
Right.
However, just being able to say, I sell it on Amazon for $12.95, but here is your copy, that has
Yeah.
more emotional impact.
Yeah. It's so you're talking there about the kind of heat and light and authority, for want of a better term, that comes from having the book on the subject. I mean, there's so many examples now. We've worked with over 1,000 people, but the example that always springs to mind is a podcast that you might have listened to that I recorded last year with Paul Ross, who's a podiatrist. And he tells the story of, he's got 3 or 4 books on several different conditions. And the latest one was called My Damn Toe Hurts. And it's for whatever the condition is that makes your toe hurts. But he tells the story of a guy coming in, I don't know if it was a guy or a girl, but a patient coming in and being sat in the chair And this was a new patient. There was no kind of real connection with them. And halfway through the process, they were saying, "Oh, I've just realized you're Paul. You're the person who wrote the book." And there was this kind of elevation in the experience because he'd written the book. I often say that exactly the same words on a website or on a YouTube video don't have the same impact as the fact that we print them on and glue them together on dead trees. It must be the dead trees in the paper and the dead cows in the glue. There's something about that combination that makes it appealing to people. But
Right.
there is definitely something about that. And our approach is, I mean, we're pretty adamant the difference between a traditional book and a conversation starting book. And we're in the conversation starting book world because the traditional book world is expensive and there's a lot of effort put into it that doesn't get the returns for us as real business owners. But one of the things that we definitely do get is the fact that it is a book. We call it a book. It looks like a book. It's printed as a book. Even if people are using the digital versions, we tell people to refer to it as a digital version of the book and not an ebook because that is irrelevant and unnecessarily devalues it. And
I
we
didn't know
lay it
that.
keep.
See, I learned something. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So there you go. So when you say to someone, when you say to a customer, I'll send you a digital version of my book, or you say to the next customer, I'll send you my ebook, what you're sending them is the exact same thing. But even just talking about it now, you can imagine the perception on the other end. Someone receiving the digital copy of the book, oh, that's great. Someone receiving an ebook, oh, like an ebook is a PDF I can download off the internet. Why is that valuable? So just
Mhm.
those little psychological things that reinforce that. Not that we're doing this purely for authority, but if there's authority there to be taken, we should make the most of it. It's another reason where I'm not sure. So the later ones that you did with us versus the earlier ones, the ones that the digital versions that we send out are laid out exactly as the book is. So there's left and right page pagination, and whereas there's a blank page in the book, there's a blank page in the digital version. Again, when you think about the use case, having a blank page on a digital version is pretty irrelevant. But the reason that we do it is because we're trying to keep this perception going that it's a digital version of the book, and
Mhm.
because it is a published book, that has more authority. So anyway, all of these things that kind of amplify the point that you mentioned is that out in the world there is a enhanced credibility and authority and heat and light that goes along with having a published
Mhm.
book. We know behind the scenes that that's easier to do now than it was 30 years ago, but still it has that element to it.
Can I ask you a question? I'm going to interview you for a
Yeah.
second.
Yeah, of course.
Uh, so some documents I may buy are in a flip book format, and
Right.
you hear the page going over. Is that something that you have tried and recommended?
So it's funny. So I'm down in the office in Florida now rather than at home in Pennsylvania just this week, and I was meeting yesterday with Betsy and Christy, and we were running through some of the additions that we want to make to the package, and we wrote down on the list those flipbook page turner type things. So when we last looked at it a few years ago, it was problematic. Everyone needed a special app in order to download it. They were typically hosted on a subscription service at the provider, and then it was slow and clunky. If people were doing it on a cell phone or an iPad, it just didn't really work very well.
Mhm.
So the technology has improved a little bit, but there's still a little bit of a barrier to doing that because typically it's not as easy as a PDF where you send someone an email and it's got a PDF embedded in it, or it has a link to a PDF that's on like Amazon or Dropbox. They can just click on it and it will just immediately open up in the browser. Every other solution is typically either they need to download something or they need to go to a web page and it's got the other website's Chrome around it and it's a little bit clunky.
Right.
So I think we're still generally in the camp of it's not worth it. The benefit of keeping to that book framework with a formatted PDF that looks like a book ticks the majority of that. But it is something that we're looking at to see if there's a tool that does it, because I think the use case there would be to send it out in an email to someone and say, hey, thanks for requesting a copy of the book. There's some really great information on it, particularly if you're in this scenario. Check out this section that is it's really
Exactly.
useful. I've actually included two links for you. One is to the PDF, just the PDF version, and then another is to the page turner. So depending on which you prefer, some people prefer one or the other. Just know that it's the same content. So that might be a use case for it.
Yeah, that would be a
Um,
good A/B test to just see which one they choose.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think still the majority of the services that do it well, it's a subscription service. So there is a cost overhead. One of the other ways of using it might be is if you're doing videos and you're talking about the content of the book and you were doing like a screen share, like say you did a behind the scenes, like a in the email sequence after someone opted in, if you
Mhm.
did a behind the scenes, like a deeper dive on one chapter and you were doing a screen share, I mean, it might be worth having a page turner just because maybe it's more visually compelling. But again, that would be a test between is it more visually compelling or is it just unnecessarily distracting? So it's definitely interesting. And the good thing about all of this conversation, the good thing about it is technology continues to move forwards.
Mhm.
And having created the thing, you've done 90% of the work for whatever technology change there is in the future. Like if the whole PDF standard changed and it went away and everyone switched to the .mob or MOBI, like the KDP, the Kindle books. Like imagine that everything suddenly changed to that. Well, you've done all the work. It's just a case of reconfiguring it for the new platform. So
Mhm.
it's gives so many opportunities once you've got it created, just to keep up with whatever the latest use case is for it.
Gotcha.
That was a long answer to a short question.
Well, I'm sorry, we didn't rehearse that, but I just, that was just was interesting because
No.
because I'm studying for a test and that's what they provided is for me to,
Ah, right, okay.
for my, test scores.
So that's interesting then. So your experience of using it, if you imagine that you had that flip version versus just the PDF version where you would just scroll through in whatever PDF software that you had, the experience of you doing it, was it more clunky using that page turner or did it add anything to it?
It
And then
didn't,
from right, didn't add anything.
it did not, because what I wanted to do was print a few pages at a time so I could lay in bed and not be in a screen. I was trying to cut down my
Right,
blue screen time before I go to sleep, but reading, just a few printed out pages would satisfy that and also, help me do my studying at a quiet time. And, I didn't want to be,
right. And if you drop from sleep as you're falling asleep and there's some paper falls on your face, that's one thing.
right.
If an iPad falls on your face, that's a different story.
That's right. So it did not satisfy what I was actually aiming for. So
Right.
in that context, I only had to do it at my computer, you know.
Yeah. And a
Mhm.
lot of reasons people do it as well is this idea of locking stuff down. So a reason that some people or some organizations don't like PDFs is that when the PDF is out there, it's out there. You can't do anything, or it's very difficult to do anything to restrict it. So sometimes they'll put them in these other platforms that restricts entry. But then again, the use case for that, it's a misalignment between the customer experience and what you're trying to do. You're trying to
Mhm.
lock this stuff away and you make it additionally inconvenient for the client because they can't open it on every device, or they can't print it off when they want to, or they can't. Most PDF softwares now allow you to highlight and mark up in the document itself. So
Mhm.
again, thinking about it from the user's perspective rather than from the company's perspective, another reason for keeping it simple and making it as accessible as possible.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Um.
I was able to go from, I did, my first book was around 64 pages. And so then I didn't want to do it because I didn't have the equipment. I took it to an outside printer and had about 200 printed. And that lasted me 6, 7, 8 months, something like that. I was giving them out left and right. Um, and that I ordered more. I think I ordered maybe, 1,200, over the years. And every year or so, I would update a little bit here and there, change out pictures.
Right.
As I would be explaining things to people, I think of an illustration. I says, that's what I want to use. So I'd go back
Right.
and tweak one paragraph, or I would, you know, if there was a news event or something like that that was more current, then I would try to bring the and plus I wanted to change the copyright date every year, when I did it too.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And
To
so
make
I
it
would
seem more up to date.
exactly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the last version that was I would call a book was in 18. I last really did any major tweaking to it in 20 or 21, something like that. And by
Right.
that time I was so busy during COVID, I really didn't have time to do anything else. But now, but then as things came back a little bit to normal, then I wanted to do a better rewrite. And I says, well, I'm going to use, because always had continued listening to you and your guest. I mean, you have some awesome, very smart guests. I don't know why I'm on here, but you have some wonderful. You have
Well,
a wide variety that gives me, expands my
right.
universe, right?
And it's easier. I don't know if you find the same, but I find it's easier to listen to someone else's specific business, but think about the principles and then apply them to my own thinking, or even apply it to their business, because then you're just thinking about the principles and you're not thinking about the implementation. Like if every guest was in the remediation business and they were talking about things, a reasonable portion of your brain would be thinking at the details of the actual job of work, the remediation piece, and not at the marketing principle piece. So anyway, I'm not sure if you're the same, but I like listening to a broad spectrum because
Mhm.
the ideas, you can concentrate on the ideas and not get stuck in the weeds of the business itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I do appreciate the fact that it it looks. I've added. I think we're up to 160 pages on the new book.
Right.
A lot thicker, and it looks good, feels good, and so you can't deny it is a book.
Right. Yeah. I
And
think that the way that you did it as well was the perfect way of starting off with something that's manageable and then adding over time based off that real world feedback. Because so many, it's like the lean model of get something out there first, or the what's the saying? No plan survives contact with the enemy, or the Mike Tyson one of everyone's got a plan until I punch him in the face, which is a bit more direct. But this idea of you could spend, and this is what again, I'm going to try and not go off on a rant because I think I did that 1 or 2 shows ago. But the whole bestseller marketplace that's out there of people charging tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to write a book under the premise that you'll become a bestseller and then sit back and people just start knocking on your door. There is definitely a use case for that, but it's the top of the market where creating the Rolls Royce of a book in one go and putting all the eggs in that basket, where that pays off and you get a return on that investment. For the majority of us, the vast majority of us real world business owners, if we start off with our reckon first, our feel for what will resonate with the market, but then we add over time, not only does it mean that it's likely to get done because it's the scope is more constrained, but if it turns out that we need to pivot, then we haven't kind of sunk everything in one. I mean, you were talking about the breadth of your business is pretty broad, but knowing that mold was the first one and starting with that, and you can imagine a scenario where you'd started with water remediation or air quality or something that didn't quite hit the mark, and then the feedback that you get, people were always asking about more mold questions. If you'd have spent 50, $60,000 on the air quality book and years to write it, I mean, it's your approach of creating something that starts the conversation and then iterating based on that feedback. It's by far the most successful way of doing it.
right, and because we do want to be an education based company, it is a slow migration toward the rear. I start laying in little hints. We can help you
Right,
with that.
right,
Give us a call or and so forth. And we're probably 30 pages in before I really start putting those hints that yes, you may have this problem and you can take care of it. But if this is too much to handle, I'm here for you. And so
right.
no advert saying you need to call us because we're the best or anything like that. We don't toot our own horn. We want to set the bar and then let them decide who's reaching that bar or not. Because
Yeah,
in my business there are so many shysters, so many high pressure salesmen that want to scare you into doing work. Oh my God, your house is going
right,
to be eat up from mold. You need to run,
right.
burn the house
Yeah,
down,
yeah.
whatever.
Like as soon as they start asking questions, it's well, if I mean, if you want your children to die, then I mean, you could not do it. But I mean, it's like the anything to do with babies. The not that I've personally experienced this, but I've heard people say like you go into the the stroller. Is that a British word or is that an American word? I'm getting confused. Anyway, like the pushchair, the stroller type
Mhm.
salespeople, and they say, well, there's this model and this model, which is in the price range that you're thinking about. But for people who really value their child's safety, there's this $1,000 plus model over here, and it's
Mhm.
that psychological. And I think that's what everyone is super conscious of, even going into it. Like the reason that the husband, to a certain degree, kind of is turning a blind eye to it is because they don't want to make the call and have that salesman saying, well, clearly your wife is suffering here, so if you loved her, you'd give me the
Mhm.
$1,000 that I'm asking for.
Right. It your ethics over time will always out outweigh, the cost you have to charge. Because I'm not going to be cheap.
Right,
We're not going to be the cheapest. We're going to do things
right,
right. I got, $4 million worth of insurance, just because I got the word mold in my name.
right. Yeah,
And
yeah,
so it's not a cheap business. And so, and it's a complex with a lot of variables and put pieces of the puzzle. And I like the way one of your previous ones, Tim, starts with a W, but he talked about it being complex, and it's not a transaction. Here, I want a hot dog. It's not that kind of,
right.
um, because a lot of times when I go in and do an inspection, I charge for inspection, I do testing and so forth. So people may say, well, some people will say, well, I can get a free mold inspection, from, this three letter over here. And I says, well,
Yeah,
are you getting an inspection or are you getting a salesman? Because
yeah,
we're, I haven't spent this, 30 years of education and can give it away. And because we charge for it, it's the wording I like is sift, sort, and screen. If they are willing to pay my $259 for me just to show up the door and spend an hour and a half to 2 hours with them, then I know they're serious enough to possibly do work with us.
yeah.
And
And
it
they know,
go ahead.
and they know that you're coming in there, you're providing the service for that inspection to give them the best information on what the next step is. And if they've come through the book funnel anyway, they already know that you're willing to share and give away the knowledge to put them in the most empowered position to take the next step. So that inspection that is comprehensive and more broad than some of the kind of dash in, dash out, and it's just
Oh,
a sales
exactly. And
opportunity.
they get a written report, usually 7 to 10 pages, at the end is
Right.
the notes and so forth.
Yeah.
So they
And
get
that's
good
what I
value
like.
for that.
Exactly. And it's part of the process. So that's what I really like about this idea that we keep reinforcing of the conversational the conversation starting book, and that conversation is broader than just a transaction. So starting that journey by educating them and helping them understand the questions that are important to them or things they might not realize or reinforce the things that they know already. And then the next step is we need to elevate this conversation to something that's more fact-based and detailed. And it's not just coming in for a record and a sales call, it's actually giving you the value. And even at that point, you still may choose to take that somewhere else, but hey, we're all happy with that because we've brought the conversation along and there's an introduction to the services, there's a value exchange in the value that you give and the cost that's charged for it. I think
Mm.
it's a much more transparent type of relationship. Now, if you're in a business where you're able to do something that is zero charge up front because there's not um, there isn't the cost overhead or the value overhead, like that initial transaction, the value proposition on that is much smaller, then hey, it makes sense that maybe there's no charge type things. Like
Right.
for us, when we have like I'll do a 20-minute call with pretty much everyone to talk about their book idea because I've got the bandwidth to do it and there's the ability to do it and it's quite quick. But as we're starting to get more into, if we want to do a consultation on what your book idea is, and then you walk away from that with some real detailed steps to the process based on our framework, but you could take that and go away by yourself, then that's the stair stepping that we've got. But
Mhm.
I think that adding value and having a transfer of value at the right level as part of this broader conversation, it really makes sense for bringing everyone along in the same way.
Two things I want to mention. One, it's amazing. More people will pay attention to you if they're paying you.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of people, have you heard the expression free advice is worth every penny? Um, and the other thing is a lot of if I go in and do an inspection and I find out, hey, you need to call a plumber. Your HVAC is what's causing this. You need to get your HVAC fixed first. Yeah, we can remove the mold, but until you change the environment or the nexus of the problem in the first place,
Right.
you're going to be mad when that new mold comes back in 2 years. So
Right.
so I had a customer call 9 months ago. He says, "Oh, I am so sorry, but we hadn't called you, but we had this happen, this happened. I had to get this done. I finally got what your recommendation list said. I'm finally ready for it. So, give me a new price on this project." And we're about 24,000, and that's an average. That's a little better than average job for us. Uh,
Right.
but a lot of our jobs are in the $7,000 range. So it's not a $3 hot dog. It's
Right.
complicated. It's a time process, and you have to be that advisor along the way. And
Yeah.
even after you give them the book, it's best if you could. Now I'm a texter, so I will just text. Hey, did you get your HVAC fixed, or what did the plumber find when he went there? Those kind of things. Just
Right.
every couple of months, every couple of weeks, every couple of months, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or
And
just
it's
shoot them a picture of a product that would really help them.
right, because it keeps the conversation going. I mean, this whole idea of conversation starting, it just happens to be that books are the most effective way of starting that conversation. But the product, the thing that we're most interested in, isn't book sales. It isn't even the books themselves. It's just that's the mechanism that we're using. It's the conversation because it's the minority of people who are ready to take action immediately. It's not like you say, it's not a transactional business. We're not selling them a hot dog outside a football stadium and they're hungry and the transaction takes place immediately, or you're not the plumber where they've got a water leak and it needs to happen immediately. These are processes and projects that have a certain cadence to them, which is a little bit longer, and keeping that conversation going in the way that's the most convenient for you and for them, there's lots of opportunities.
Mhm.
Um, I want to make sure that we talk about. I always joke that time goes fast, but yet again, time goes fast on the podcast here. I want to talk quickly before we wrap up, though, about the ways that you're using the books, and I'll include some pictures here because Lee was kind enough to send across a few pictures of the way that he's using it. So as you're listening, check out the link on. I don't know if it will show up in the podcast feed, but on the website there'll be the links in the website. So there was a couple of pictures he'd sent through, three of them that really stood out. One was there was a sticker on the book where you were using it in a certain place. So I want to touch on that. The other one was the vehicle wrap, just because I find that I, funny is not quite the right word, but it just tickles something when I see it. So I want to talk about that quickly. And then the third one was there was a picture on a what do you call them, like the rollout board things outside a conference room, it looked like.
The poster
So
board.
the poster board, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's
That
talk about those
that
three.
poster board is right now in our foyer, but when we would do trade shows and so forth, that would go to the trade show, and we would have
Okay.
stacks of our books. No, we'd have one book out there, scarcity. We wouldn't show them all because that kind of lessen the value. But
Yeah.
said, yeah, well, you can go get one. And so how much would this one, how much is this one? And I sold a few. But if they really did, have us call out, then I would just go ahead and hand them one, right? So
Right.
So I kind of felt I wanted to feel their real interest before I, gave them at that time a $5 book. Now they're going, that'll cost a lot more than that for me to do.
Yeah.
So the poster board is one thing. One thing that you'll see is, now this is a little ninja, I guess. I don't know what the right word is, but the sticker on the front says waiting room copy, please do not remove, see back cover. And on the back side, I had another one says, to get your free copy of this, go to freemoldbook.com. And it also
Right.
had a QR code that they could do. So do you think I went and asked permission before I left them in the waiting room?
Oh,
No. I give it to all my employees. I say, when you take your kid or grandma to the, you just leave it there. If they
really?
throw,
That's hilarious.
you just leave
Okay.
it. All right. So they're there because of health, right?
Right.
And so that was my target audience.
I tell you what, you were joking before saying, hey, you've had some other great guests. I don't know why I'm here. But if, as anyone's listening, this is the gold for this episode. That kind of guerrilla tactic of just, because we often talk about this idea of complementary, non competing businesses. And I think I've even used an example of like a doctor's waiting room as the perfect place to leave some things. But I must admit, I'd never thought about just doing it. But that's perfect.
Um, and before COVID, we had one salesman. He's no longer with us, but I'd assigned him to sell air purifiers. That was supposed to spend his time in. So he would go and visit allergists and so forth, and we'd leave one in the waiting room. Says to get your own. We had a bumper sticker made just up property of, but to get one of your own, go to call this number, go this website, and so forth. Just
Right.
puppy dog. And so we sold one or two, but the people who call on doctors, they have I have to admire them. They have a certain way of handling things. They're very suave and very diplomatic. Our guys was just, didn't look like, one of those farm reps,
Right.
And so it happened to be that I was ready to get a wrap on my car anyway. And so I waited I waited 2 or 3 months until I finalized the new picture. This one, of course, I paid for the graphic. I paid, got the rights to use that many years ago, changed it up. And so I use, and for myself, I use a guy on Fiverr, been using him for about 10 years. He's got all
Right.
the logos and everything for both of my companies. And he's just kind of knows what I like. Very few
Yeah.
good English, just good conversation, reasonable price. And so that fit with, the rest of my logos and so forth that are already on the wraps and on the vehicles.
Right. So do you track at all, or do you have an indication on how that lands with the people out there? So how many people use the QR code to get a copy of the book, or how many people grab it from the vehicle, or the events? Obviously, you're there, so you know what happens at the events. But do you ever feel either specifically or anecdotally on the other ones?
It's not perfect, but yes, to some extent. We had the option of being able to send out the book, automatically when somebody did it, but we opted not to do that because my daughter, who's actually the marketing lady, she sees everyone, and she can, if somebody from a foreign country, we can
Right.
just tell that they want us to
Just
send it to, there's a lot of spam, and robot bots and whatever. So she sees every one of those, and it does ask, how did you hear about us? Now, on our front end, we have a call-in sheet that Miss Deborah asks, and she goes through all of those, and right on there, and she's instructed, and she does a good job at this, the Columbo question. yeah, if you remember Columbo, he was almost out the door and he'd ask one more question.
Right. One more thing. Yeah.
Yeah, one more thing. So no, oh, by the way, how'd you hear about us? And and
Right.
and and so yeah, that was written down every time.
Yeah. Those this idea of getting out in front of audiences and understanding where they are. So the kind of connection between the doctor, surgery, and people being there for health and mold might be something that they're interested in. Does that go broader than that? Do you have other examples or the other, because you've been doing this for a while? So is it an easy thought process to think, okay, there's this group of people who might be the perfect match of clients and they're in this space? Is it easy for you to think about where they are, or was that doctor's surgery example, was that the response, the outcome of like some dedicated thinking and like a brain trust for a period of time?
I don't remember the thought process at the time. Um, entrepreneurs have way too many ideas, but that they don't ever follow through on.
Right.
So a lot of times, a lot of our business also comes from people who are in the real estate business, either from the real estate agents or inspectors. So yes,
Right.
we go to realtors' offices and mention, what we do and how it benefits them, to maybe
Okay.
have the owner look at the house and make sure they have a chance to make any adjustments before somebody else comes in and wants to lower the price because they found or won't walk away because of mold. So we can do
Right.
pre-inspection there. Or if somebody on the other side, if somebody's buying, then a special, Alabama is not one of those that requires a mold inspection. Other states do, but a lot of people who are moving in just assume they're going to get that in a radon test, and so
Right.
they ask for it, and I'm on the Rolodex of probably out of 150 inspectors in town. I'm probably on the Rolodex of probably a good 30 or 40 of them.
Okay. Yeah. And I recorded a podcast yesterday, so it'll probably be the show before this as people are listening to it, but a couple of weeks ahead of where we're talking today. So Jeff Klein, who I was talking to yesterday, helps business owners who trying to kind of like transition into speaking events and not to become professional speakers, but kind of like as a lead generation type thing. So he had a list, and again, if people have been watching along, they'll have seen it last week. But he had a list where he documented all of the Chamber of Commerce meetings, all of the I forget what else was on the list now, but there were several of these kind of industry organizations that had a mandate for bringing speakers in for their guests. And then the premise was, of course, if you have a book, you've already got the majority of a delivery there, and now you've also got a book as the call to action, the next step. So is that something that you've explored or had opportunity to do? Kind of speak to those. You mentioned the realtors, like speak at a realtor organization, or the inspectors, I'm guessing would have the same thing, or even
Right,
Chamber of Commerce.
right. Have not done Chamber of Commerce. I have done building code. Now that's an odd bunch. They are really, really to the letter of the law kind of folks,
Right,
and so I had to go uh, knee to knee, talking very, explaining to him, because I took my code book, he had his code book, and he's saying, well, look here, it says this. I said, well, I understand, but over here
right,
it says I can
right,
do this. And and so once he saw I knew what I was doing, and I says, I am not doing anything to detrimentally hurt the house. It's only an improvement. The way you want it is great, but this is better. and
right,
and I brought out, magazines and other organizations who said the same thing, and he finally acquiesced. It took a
right.
2 or 3 weeks before we came to a resolution. But
Well,
would you know that he called me the next year? He says, Mr. Ramey, would you come and talk to our association of building codes? It was, about 20 different cities who come together every other
right,
month, and they just had, ate at a meet and three, that kind of thing. And
yeah,
and so it just sort of again, being able to get in front of the right people, because change is hard. People don't like change. And the
Right,
way that we can take care of crawl spaces is change from what the codes say. And it leaves the house, cleaner and more healthier, doesn't smell, and, saves the energy. All these different things. After we remove the mold, we change the environment of the crawl space so the rest of the house gets healthier. But that's
right.
change is hard. And so again,
Yeah. And
you
people,
sometimes you have to fight for what you believe in.
yeah. And people admit some initial responses, particularly I think where there is this kind of confrontation type industry of the building inspectors, someone's trying to do this and they've got to be led through the law. No, it has to be this way around. Or um, when changes come through, there's either it changes a whole load of practices underneath, or there's some conflict about whether it's changing to A or B. So I think people's natural response sometimes is that no, push away or stand off first.
Mhm.
But the illustration that you gave there is perfect in this idea of conversation starting. We're usually talking about it in terms of clients and that kind of funnel, but this conversation starting with other industry professionals and that cohort of peers where there is a relationship that can be developed over time. And the fact that a book exists and brings all of that information together in a way that is either a backup to a conversation that's had, or a next step, or it just brings it together. All of these conversations start and lead towards things further down the track. And I think throughout all of this conversation, that's what's really resonated, and I hope it resonates for listeners, is you've brought together this information in something that is a book that's got more authority than if you had it in a different format, but it really lays the ground for this longer term relationship with people, and just kicks everything off on the right foot, and brings people along with you, whether that's clients or partners or collaborators. It's just
Mhm.
such a great way of doing it.
Right.
Um, Time's flown by. What were you going to say though? You
Okay,
definitely going to
so
cover something.
here's just I usually hand it to a customer with in a sleeve like this, very cheap in Amazon,
Okay,
Temu, Alibaba or something like that. That adds value. They feel like it's been, and plus mine were getting all, wrinkly and
right,
moisture in the car. So this
yeah,
preserved the way they look, so if you carry them around. And that added, to me, that was just a nice little
yeah.
perk.
Again, I'm pretty sure I'm going to call this podcast something to do with guerrilla marketing, because these ideas are fantastic. That extra thought process, when you think about who your clients are, that the baseline is health concerns. When they're thinking about mold, they're already thinking about kind of like the hazmat suits and the breathing apparatus, and that's their mental space. So you giving someone, it's like the whole COVID, when you went to hotel rooms in COVID, like increasingly everything was individually wrapped and separated, because the psyche, the mentality was like this protection. There's something out there that's trying to get me. So your clients are already in that brain space to a certain degree. So the fact that you're giving it to them in that plastic wrap that has a subconscious element of hygiene, and we're thinking about this type of thing. I mean, what a fantastic extra step.
They less than a penny a bag, in bulk.
Right, right. This we'll definitely circle back in a few months and talk about some more of these ideas in some give people some more ideas that you're going through. But the it's such a heavy lift for people. So if they're thinking about doing a book by themselves, that's the most difficult way of doing it. I
Absolutely.
understand that some people do it that way, but it's the most difficult. Working with us is a much lighter lift, but there's still you've got to put some mental effort into it.
Exactly.
And it's the most disappointing thing that you see people get to the end of the process and they kind of think, oh, thank goodness for that. Now it's done. And you don't see people doing things with it. Once this is created, I mean, give yourself a week off if you want, but come back to it and then think, okay, I've now got this asset. What are all of the ways that I can use this asset in the most effective way? Is it physical? Is it digital? If it's digital, which format? Going back to the PDF versus page turner conversation. If I'm at a conference, do I want to give them a copy of the conference or just make it easy for them to get a copy? If they're coming in and I'm asking them where they heard about us, identifying that they did come through the book or didn't come through the book, how does that change the follow-up and the conversation, whether it makes sense to text them or email them, all of these things about I've now have a series of assets and how can I use those to the best degree possible. Just that little bit of extra effort and attention and using it. I mean, it can really make a huge amount of difference for
Right,
people.
right.
Yeah.
But once this gets, once I feel like it's left the nest, it's on its
Right.
own, and I've got all the, because here's a damaging admission. My weakness is one of the campaign I plan to do next, and I haven't got to it yet, is I'm going to go back to all my 2,000 clients in the past and say, hey, I really enjoyed working with you, and I think you trusted us, and I just wanted to give you a chance, one of the first chances to have this new book, and here's
Right.
your free copy. So I'm lack on that. That's a future project for me. So everybody's got
Right.
something to improve on, right?
Like you said before, I mean, as entrepreneurs, business owners, we've got more ideas than we have time to execute on them. So
Yeah.
everyone's got a list of things. We'll talk after we wrap up for a second, but we should talk about having a strategy call about that because we've got lots of experience of doing that with people. So we can do that. And maybe we can use that as the example to circle back in 6 months or so and do an update show just to give people some more ideas and go a little bit deeper on the ones that we've tried.
Hmm.
Um, Before we wrap, I want to make sure that people have got opportunity to find out more about you and the organization there. So where's a good place for people to go to learn more?
Okay. If you want the book itself, I have a dedicated website called freemoldbook.com. My website is alabamamold.com. Alabamamold.com. Pretty simple. It is geographically confining a little bit, but
Right.
rest assured, if you are from out of state and you decide you want a book, that's fine. You're going to get it. You're going to get a PDF, and we look forward to answering any questions. And for all of your readers and listeners and what viewers and so forth, I'm just going to say I've got a swipe file of already stuff on my second book. I'm going to do a book for lake owners and the humidity problems that go with lakes.
Ah, fantastic. Yeah.
But so I would just suggest that go ahead and take the first step. The book will pay its weight in gold and dividends.
Yeah. Fantastic. I mean, for anyone who's ever thought about mold issues, I mean, as you say, there's pages and pages of your expertise and experience in there that will help them out. And to see it as an example of how you're using it to engage customers and start that conversation, perfect for that as well. I'll make sure that there are links to those web pages and to your LinkedIn profile as well. I'll put all of those in the show notes. So as people are watching and listening on the podcast player or on the website, there'll be links straight through. As I mentioned, I'll put those images that you sent through in the show notes as well. So I'm not sure, I think they show up in most podcast players, not iTunes, but most podcast players, I think they do. But I'll put them on the website as well. So another reason for people to head across there. Lee, fantastic. This has gone so fast. I really love just the implementation of this and the ideas of getting it out there because it's one thing to create something. And I think the process that we've talked about in our process helps you to create the best thing possible. But it's another thing to actually be out there using it in all of these fantastic ways to start the conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm
If
sure
you've done,
people have
if
got
you've
a lot.
made a book, don't let it sit on the shelf. Get it out there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, thank you again. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Everyone,
Thank you. I
thanks for
appreciate it. Privilege. Been a real privilege.
it's a pleasure. And we'll definitely circle back in a couple of months and do a follow up. So, everyone, make sure you subscribe to the show and check in for the emails because spam's an issue these days and mailboxes don't always want to deliver emails. So, make sure that you're checking out things and then we'll catch you in the next one.